Greenland's ice wall just shattered, and the mega-tsunami it unleashed was already heading for coastal towns before a single warning siren had a chance to sound. Picture a block of ice, the size of a major city, breaking off in slow motion, then hitting the ocean like a hammer. The wave that followed wasn't supposed to be possible. Not this big, not this fast, not aimed at this many people. Seismographs across the North Atlantic exploded with readings scientists had never seen before. Coastal alarm systems in 3 countries triggered at the same time. And the tsunami traveled farther and moved faster than every single model ever built to predict it. But here is the part that has researchers truly terrified. This wasn't a random accident. Something had been eating away at that ice wall from the inside for years. Something the warning systems were never designed to detect. So the real question isn't whether this will happen again. It's how much of Greenland's ice is already gone from the inside, and will we get any warning at all when the next wall comes down? December 27th, 5:42 a.m. Greenland Mean Time. A fracture line that had been spreading silently for months finally reached its breaking point along the Evacuations Glacier's northern face. In less than 4 minutes, a slab of ice measuring 3 miles wide, half a mile thick, and taller than a 60-story building broke away from the glacier wall and collapsed into Disco Bay. The sound reached the nearest research station like a thunderclap. The shockwave that followed was something else entirely. Seismograph stations in Greenland, Iceland, and Canada registered the event simultaneously, not as an earthquake, as something unfamiliar. The signal was sharper, faster, and more violent than a standard calving event. Researchers at the Danish Meteorological Institute stared at readings that didn't match any category in their database. Within 6 minutes of the collapse, automated tsunami detection buoys anchored across the North Atlantic began transmitting alerts. The wave generated at the point of collapse measured 58 feet at origin. That is not a rogue wave. That is a wall of water moving at highway speeds across open ocean. As it traveled south and east, it lost height but gained reach, spreading across a fan of ocean that put Iceland's western coastline, the northern tip of Newfoundland, and Greenland's own coastal settlements directly in its path. Iceland's Civil Protection Agency issued evacuation orders for low-lying coastal zones at 6:09 a.m., 27 minutes after the ice hit the water. In the fishing village of Stykkishólmur, on Iceland's Snæfellsnes Peninsula, Harbor Master Einar Johnson was already moving vessels when the alert reached his radio. He had felt something wrong before the sirens. A strange stillness in the water, a pull, like the bay was inhaling. In the Greenlandic settlement of Kekertarsuaq, located just 40 miles from the collapse point, there was no 27-minute window. Residents had minutes. Coast Guard helicopter pilot Anna Sorensen was airborne within 8 minutes of the alert, coordinating evacuations over a radio channel overwhelmed with traffic. Below her, she could already see the waterfront changing color as the first surge reached the harbor. Across the affected coastlines, emergency services rescued over 2,100 people from immediate danger zones in the first 3 hours. 14 coastal structures were destroyed or severely damaged. 3 fishing vessels sank in harbor. The economic loss to communities whose entire livelihoods depend on coastal infrastructure was immediate and total. By the time the wave energy finally dissipated across the mid-Atlantic, the event had been recorded by 47 separate monitoring stations across 6 countries. Every one of them had captured something their designers never anticipated. And the data they sent back raised a question nobody was ready to answer. Evacuations Glacier did not break without warning. It broke after decades of warnings that the world was too slow to act on. Greenland's ice sheet is the second largest body of ice on Earth. It holds enough frozen water that if it melted completely, global sea levels would rise by 23 feet. Not inches. Not a few feet. 23 feet. That number would redraw every coastline on the planet, swallowing Miami, Amsterdam, Shanghai, and dozens of other major cities before most evacuation plans could even be activated. Evacuations is Greenland's fastest-moving glacier. It has been retreating inland at an accelerating rate since the early 1990s. In 1990, it was losing roughly 20 meters of ice per year at its front edge. By 2023, that number had climbed past 40 meters annually. The glacier was not just shrinking, it was accelerating toward open water, like something had released a brake. The mechanism driving that acceleration lives underwater. Warm Atlantic water, pushed north by shifting ocean circulation patterns, has been tunneling beneath Evacuations' submerged base for years. This process, called submarine melting, eats the glacier from the bottom up, carving out hidden cavities that satellite images cannot fully capture. The ice above looks intact. Underneath, it is hollow. Researchers at the National Snow and Ice Data Center in Boulder, Colorado, flagged accelerating submarine melt rates at Evacuations as far back as 2015. Their reports recommended enhanced monitoring. The funding never arrived. Dr. Ian Fenty at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory had been tracking the ocean temperature anomalies feeding into Evacuations' base for 4 years before the collapse. The water reaching the glacier's underbelly was measuring 2.7 degrees Celsius above the historical average for that region. That does not sound dramatic, but at that interface between ice and ocean, a single degree of warming can double melt rates. 2.7 degrees was devastating. The concept scientists feared most was marine ice cliff instability. When a glacier retreats past a certain depth of water, the ice face becomes too tall to support its own weight. It does not melt gradually. It collapses mechanically, in chunks, each collapse exposing a fresh cliff face that is equally unstable. It becomes self-reinforcing. Each failure triggers the next one, faster than the last. Dr. Twyla Moon at the National Snow and Ice Data Center described Evacuations in a 2023 research brief as a glacier that had passed its stable threshold. Her words were precise and quiet, and almost completely ignored outside the scientific community. The glacier heard none of that. It just kept moving. The instruments did not lie. They just told a story that nobody had prepared a category for. Within seconds of the Evacuations collapse, seismograph networks across the North Atlantic began recording a signal that defied standard classification. Earthquake algorithms rejected it. Volcanic event protocols did not match. What the sensors captured was a hybrid signature, part mechanical fracture, part hydrodynamic impact, a seismic fingerprint that had never been formally documented at this scale from a glacial source. Researchers at the University of Copenhagen's Niels Bohr Institute flagged the anomaly within 11 minutes of the event and immediately began pulling archived data to see if anything comparable had ever been recorded. Nothing had. Hydrophone arrays, the underwater microphone networks originally built to monitor nuclear tests during the Cold War, picked up the collapse across a listening range of over 2,000 miles. The acoustic signal traveled through the ocean at speeds that allowed monitoring stations in Iceland, Norway, and the northeastern United States to timestamp the event with extraordinary precision. What surprised analysts was not the volume of the signal, it was the duration. The collapse did not produce a single impact sound. It produced a cascading sequence of fracture events spread across nearly 4 minutes, suggesting the ice face did not fall as one unit, but as a series of sequential failures, each one triggering the next. Satellite imagery from the European Space Agency's Sentinel-2 system captured before and after frames that showed the scale of change with brutal clarity. The fracture line that had been visible in imagery for 7 months had propagated its full length in under 5 minutes. Glaciologists at the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany measured the newly exposed ice cliff face at 312 feet above the waterline, with an estimated 900 feet of glacier face remaining below the surface. That exposed geometry placed it firmly within the marine ice cliff instability threshold, that researchers had modeled but never witnessed in real time. Ocean temperature sensors positioned along the Glacier's submarine base recorded a spike at the moment of collapse. The displacement of cold meltwater trapped in the subglacial cavity surged outward and upward, creating a thermal pulse that confused the nearest tsunami buoy's wave origin algorithm. The buoy was calibrated for earthquake-generated tsunamis, which behave differently. It initially underreported wave height by 34%. That miscalculation directly affected the evacuation timeline for 3 coastal communities. Dr. Sophie Nowicki at the University at Buffalo reviewed the full sensor dataset within 48 hours of the event. Her assessment was direct. Every model they had used to project Jakobshaven's behavior had underestimated the speed of structural failure by a factor that could no longer be explained by natural variability alone. The glacier had not behaved outside the range of physics. It had behaved outside the range of assumptions. And those assumptions, she noted, were still embedded in every coastal risk projection currently guiding international policy. The wave did not care about warning systems or evacuation protocols. It moved at its own speed and arrived on its own schedule. In Kikirtsuak, a Greenlandic settlement of roughly 800 people sitting 40 miles from the collapse point, the first sign was not a siren. It was the harbor. Fisherman Malik Olson had been preparing his boat for a morning run when he noticed the water pulling back from the dock in a way he had never seen in 22 years on that coastline. The bay was emptying. He ran. He was already 300 feet uphill when the first surge came through, lifting his boat out of the harbor and depositing it in the middle of the main coastal road. He watched from high ground as the waterfront his community had built over generations disappeared beneath 6 feet of churning gray water. The settlement lost its harbor master building, its primary fish processing facility, and 14 of its 31 registered fishing vessels. For a community whose entire economy runs on the sea, those numbers do not represent property damage. They represent the end of a way of life, at least temporarily, and for some families, permanently. In Stykkishólmur, Iceland, the 27-minute warning window sounds adequate until you understand the geography. One road leads out of the low-lying harbor district. It handles the town's daily traffic comfortably. During a simultaneous evacuation of 1,200 residents, it became a gridlocked single lane within 6 minutes. Coast Guard officer Sigrid Magnusdóttir directed traffic at the main junction without backup for 19 minutes while water crept up the street behind her. She kept the lane moving. Everyone in her section got out. 2 elderly residents in a different district, unreachable by road before the surge arrived, were rescued from a rooftop by helicopter 4 hours later, cold and shaken, but alive. Emergency shelters across Iceland's western coastline housed 3,400 displaced residents by nightfall. The Red Cross reported critical shortages of dry clothing, infant supplies, and medications for chronic conditions within the first 12 hours. Supply trucks could not reach 3 coastal communities due to road damage from the surge. Helicopter drops began the following morning. In Newfoundland's isolated northern communities, the warning arrived with even less lead time. The tsunami's energy had diminished but not disappeared. Wave surges of 4 to 6 feet struck unprotected harbor areas with enough force to destroy 2 fuel depots and damage the only medical clinic serving a population of 600 people across a 90-mile stretch of coastline. 41 people were injured across all affected zones. 3 remained missing 1 week after the event. Emergency coordinators described the survival rate as extraordinary given the warning time available. They also described it as lucky. And luck, as every emergency manager knows, is not a system. The tsunami made headlines. What came after it made scientists go quiet. When a section of glacier the size of what Jakobshaven lost breaks away from an ice sheet, it does not just generate a wave, it removes a structural support. The ice that collapsed was not floating. It was grounded, pressed against the seafloor, and its physical mass had been acting as a brake on the glaciers sitting directly behind it. With that mass gone, the ice upstream had one less obstacle between itself and open water. Within 72 hours of the collapse, velocity sensors embedded in the glacier detected measurable acceleration in the flow rate of ice moving toward the now exposed calving front. The brake had not just been released, it had been removed entirely. This is the mechanism glaciologists call buttressing loss. Ice shelves and grounded ice margins hold back enormous volumes of land-based ice by simply existing. When they go, the ice behind them speeds up. When the ice speeds up, it reaches the ocean faster. When it reaches the ocean faster, sea levels rise faster. The relationship is not complicated. The scale of it is. Greenland's ice sheet currently contributes approximately 0.7 millimeters to global sea level rise every single year. That number has doubled since 2000. If Jakobshaven's accelerated flow rate persists and spreads to adjacent glacier systems, independent projections from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research suggest that Greenland's annual contribution could triple within 2 decades. Tripling 0.7 millimeters sounds manageable. Compounded across 20 years alongside contributions from Antarctica and thermal ocean expansion, it is not. The tipping point concept sits at the center of every argument scientists are currently having about what the Jakobshaven collapse means long-term. A climate tipping point is the threshold beyond which a system no longer needs external pressure to keep changing. It changes itself. Feedback loops take over. Dr. Jason Box at the Geological Survey of Denmark and Greenland has argued in published research that Jakobshaven may have already crossed its individual tipping point, meaning that even if global temperatures stopped rising tomorrow, this glacier would continue retreating and calving at accelerating rates for decades. The cities that need to start paying attention are not abstract. New York's Lower Manhattan sits less than 10 feet above current sea levels. Miami's average elevation is 6 feet. London's Thames Barrier was designed for a world with lower seas than the one currently being projected. Mumbai houses 20 million people on a peninsula where the highest ground barely clears 15 feet. These are not distant warnings dressed in scientific language. They are engineering problems that coastal infrastructure was never designed to solve, and the clock attached to them just moved measurably faster. The warning systems worked. That is the official position. The unofficial position, shared quietly among the researchers who watched the data come in that morning, is far more unsettling. The Global Tsunami Early Warning Network was built in the decades following the 2004 Indian Ocean disaster, which killed over 200,000 people, largely because no detection and alert infrastructure existed across that region. The system constructed in response is genuinely impressive. Thousands of seismic stations, hundreds of deep ocean pressure sensors, satellite uplinks, and national alert networks spanning dozens of countries. For earthquake-generated tsunamis, it performs well. The Jakobshaven event was not that kind of tsunami. Glacial tsunamis behave differently from their seismic counterparts in ways that expose critical gaps in existing detection architecture. Earthquake tsunamis originate from seafloor displacement across wide areas, generating long-period waves that deep ocean pressure sensors are specifically calibrated to identify. Glacial tsunamis originate from a point source, a concentrated impact zone where ice meets water, generating shorter-period, more chaotic wave patterns that pressure sensors frequently misread or underreport. The 34% underestimation of initial wave height during the Jakobshaven event was not a malfunction. It was the system working exactly as designed for a different kind of threat. Dr. Herman Fritz at Georgia Tech has spent over a decade documenting glacial and landslide-generated tsunamis, a category of wave event that existing international warning frameworks classify as secondary hazards rather than primary threats. His research group submitted formal recommendations to the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission in 2021, requesting expanded sensor protocols specifically designed to detect ice mass-generated wave events along Greenland's coastline. The request was reviewed, acknowledged, and deferred pending funding allocation decisions that were never finalized. The coverage gap along Greenland's western coastline is not a secret within the scientific community. Monitoring buoy density in that region is roughly 1/5 of the coverage maintained in the Pacific tsunami warning zone. Communities sitting within the first 60 miles of a potential Jakob-Schaven scale collapse have, under current infrastructure, a realistic warning window of between 8 and 14 minutes. Coastal evacuation modeling for those same communities assumes a minimum of 20 minutes for successful population movement to safe elevations. That gap, 6 minutes on the optimistic end, represents the difference between an extraordinary survival rate and a catastrophic death toll. It exists not because the engineering solution is unavailable, but because the political will to fund it never materialized. Senator Maria Cantwell raised the monitoring deficit in a Senate Commerce Committee session 3 weeks after the event. The Department of Homeland Security's written response confirmed awareness of the gap. It also confirmed no emergency funding reallocation had been authorized. The sirens worked. The sirens just did not have enough time. Greenland does not exist in isolation. That is the part that is hard to sit with. The same warming ocean currents destabilizing Jakob-Schaven are pushing warm water beneath Antarctica's Thwaites Glacier on the opposite end of the planet. The same jet stream disruption driving atmospheric heat toward the Arctic is connected to extreme weather patterns across Europe, North America, and Asia. The same carbon dioxide concentrations, now approaching 425 parts per million, are the closest this atmosphere has come to the greenhouse conditions that once turned Antarctica into a rainforest and submerged coastlines that billions of people now call home. These are not separate crises running on parallel tracks. They are the same crisis expressing itself in different locations simultaneously. The 1958 Lituya Bay Mega-Tsunami in Alaska remains the largest wave event in recorded human history. A rockslide triggered a wave that reached 1,720 feet up the surrounding hillside. It killed 5 people because virtually nobody lived there. The Jakob-Schaven event generated a fraction of that wave height, but struck coastlines holding thousands of residents across multiple countries. The difference between a geological curiosity and a civilizational threat is not the size of the wave. It is the number of people standing in its path. And the number of people living within reach of glacial coastlines is not shrinking. The international political response to the Jakob-Schaven collapse moved through familiar stages. Emergency sessions at the United Nations Environment Program convened within 2 weeks. Iceland, Canada, and Denmark submitted a joint resolution requesting accelerated funding for Arctic monitoring infrastructure. The resolution passed with broad support and a 3-year implementation timeline. 3 years is also approximately how long researchers estimate before Jakob-Schaven's newly exposed calving front stabilizes enough to assess the next phase of structural risk. Dr. Alan Hubbard at the Arctic University of Norway delivered the assessment that circulated most widely among climate research institutions in the weeks following the event. His conclusion was not dramatic in its language. It did not need to be. He wrote that the Jakob-Schaven collapse represented a data point that moved the most conservative end of sea level rise projections measurably closer to the aggressive end. The range of scientific disagreement had narrowed in the wrong direction. Current atmospheric carbon levels are rising at approximately 2.5 parts per million per year. The pledges made under the Paris Agreement, if fully implemented by every signatory nation, reduce that rate. They do not stop it. The ice does not negotiate with pledges. It responds to physics. And the physics, as every dataset collected from Greenland's coastline in the past decade confirms, has been moving faster than the diplomacy designed to slow it down. The gap between those two speeds is where the next collapse lives. The fracture line is still there. It did not disappear when the wave receded. It moved. Jakobshaven's newly exposed calving front is now in direct contact with the same warm Atlantic water that carved out the cavities that caused the original collapse. The process that took decades to build to that breaking point is now working on fresh, unprotected ice. The glacier does not pause for recovery. It does not wait for funding allocations or implementation timelines or the conclusions of emergency Senate sessions. It responds to temperature, and the temperature is not dropping. In Kekertarsuaq, Malik Olson's fishing boat was recovered from the coastal road and returned to the water 3 weeks after the surge. The harbor master building is still a concrete shell. The fish processing facility has no reopening date. He goes out every morning because the sea is still there and the fish are still there and his family still needs to eat. He does not talk much about what he saw from the hillside, but he watches the water differently now. Everyone on that coastline does. That shift, the moment when an abstract scientific warning becomes something a fisherman can feel in his body, is where the real stakes of this story live. Not in the parts per million or the millimeters of annual sea level rise, though those numbers matter enormously. In the harbor that empties before anyone understands why. In the 6-minute gap between the warning a system can deliver and the time a community actually needs. In the 3 people still missing 1 week after an event that the official record will classify as a near miss. The ice wall shattered, the wave traveled, the coastlines absorbed it, and the world moved on to the next headline. But Greenland's ice sheet is still moving. Quietly, continuously, and now measurably faster than the morning before the collapse. The question scientists cannot answer yet is which section of that glacier reaches its own breaking point next. The question the rest of us need to answer is whether we will be ready when it does.